Okay, this video is to attend the first 7 objections. They argue against believing in hell. The first objection is listed on page 298. Hell seems quite contrary to the love of God. How can a God of total love make or even tolerate such a torture chamber as hell? And the 4 responses, the 4 replies are all pretty straightforward. Of course hell is antithetical to God's love. God doesn't want this to happen. But the existence of that doesn't refute God's existence or hell's existence. Reply B is also true. God is perfect mercy and forgiveness, but let's be clear about what that means. Forgiveness is a real thing, but a person has to accept it. God is offering forgiveness to every single one of us. If we choose to reject it, and we're certainly free to do that, then it can't be forced upon us, or God is not going to force it upon us based upon free will. So consequently, if we choose to reject it, then again, the concept of hell has to exist. Reply C is God's love is also truthful. Love is not blind. Love is accurate. This gets back, if you remember, the difference between kindness and goodness. Kindness is, oh, honey, everything's going to be okay. Back to the example of the psych paper, for instance. I'd be kind to you if I assigned it and said it's a minimum 5 pages, and then every one of you turn in 2 pages. And I go, oh, well, that's okay. You know, I'm going to be kind. I'm not going to hold you accountable. No, sorry. I'm not going to be kind to you. I'm going to be good to you. I'm going to be honest with you. And unfortunately, that kindness and honesty can be somewhat harsh. I'm going to say, I said 5 pages. I am not going to accept anything less than 5 pages. Now, that's me as an imperfect teacher. But parents are the same way. If you're persistently in error, if your parents are doing a good job, not a kind job, they're going to call you out on it. Same thing with God here. If we persist in sin and error and say there's no problem with it, God's going to go, hold up, son or daughter. There's an issue here, and you've got to address it. Reply D, hell doesn't refute God's love because the very fires of hell may be of God's love. And again, now I want you to go back and think of Lane Staley and how part of his torture in the last days of his life was how he cut himself off from all of his loved ones. And he knew he was cutting himself from all of his loved ones. And that hurt. But he cut himself off because he didn't want to hear. He knew that they were going to say things that he didn't want to hear and tell him to do things he didn't want to do. And so he cut himself off. But that was painful. That contributed to his suffering. That's arguably the definition of hell as well. Objection 2, bottom of page 299. Hell seems contrary to justice. What's the relation or proportion between hell's unthinkable, infinite, eternal torments and earth's thinkable, finite, temporal sins? Now, there's 3 charges here that they describe. A, temporal crimes don't merit eternal punishments. Finite crimes don't merit infinite punishments. And turn the page to 300. C, mild crimes don't merit such intense punishments. Now, letter A responds to the first. The first challenge is temporal crimes don't merit eternal punishments, but you have to remember that eternity is not specifically quantitative. It's another dimension than time. So it's kind of like you're arguing not even apples and oranges here. It's like you're arguing apples and asparagus, in the sense that you're talking about 2 different, qualitatively different forms of food. There's a fruit and then there's a vegetable. It's the same thing here. To say that the eternal punishment is worse than the temporal punishment, it's difficult to compare punishments in time and punishments outside of time. Reply B, midway down, hell's punishments are eternal but not infinite. They use that term infinite. Remember from the Kalam argument when we talked about the arguments in favor of the existence of God. Infinity is not a possibility. Endlessness is. Eternity is. Okay. Reply C, the intense images of physical torture are meant to suggest something beyond ourselves. This gets back to Hollis's comment in chat a while back that like Dante's version of the Inferno of hell doesn't seem quite right. Skip down a paragraph and it helps clarify this. Hell's punishment fits sin's crime because sin is divorce from God. So it's not that eternal fiery punishment in the sense that Dante describes, but it is one that we place upon ourselves. To use a decidedly imperfect example, Your parents say, you can't rejoin the family until you apologize for being mean to your brother or sister or whatever. You say, I'm not going to apologize. I'm going to stay in my room. so you stay in your room for an indefinite period of time. Well, now you get to skip out on meals. You get to skip out on family activities. And the family isn't specifically grounding you. Parents aren't grounding you. They're just saying, you don't get to come out until you acknowledge what you've done wrong. You and your stubbornness say, I'm not going to do it. So you cut yourself off from the family. Okay, that's... you've divorced yourself, in a sense, from the family. That's the consequence. Okay, objection 3, page 301. Not only does hell seem to contradict God's love and justice, but also God's power. The God who created the whole universe out of nothing is omnipotent, all-powerful. Power has no limit. Why doesn't it destroy hell or arrange for no one to go there? You already know the answer to this one. We shouldn't have to spend time on it. It is a function of free will. And again, it talks about the contradiction that seems to take place between omnipotence and his granting of us free will. But if we're going to be free to choose, then we have to be free to choose a place where God is not. Objection 4, page 302. Hell also seems contrary to human freedom, for no one would freely choose hell over heaven given an open and free choice. This would seem to have some bite to it. There was an interesting thing that was said in chat a while back. I asked something along the lines of, if you're not Catholic, are you automatically going to hell? And so the Krushki or Gru, I can't remember who, one of them said, no, because at the end of things, you're still given a fully informed choice. Now, this isn't something that I'm sure the Teach specifically teaches, but this is what I always share in apologetics. It is my belief that at the point of judgment, you are given an option. You may choose to follow God, or you may choose to reject God. But you're fully informed in that choice, in the sense that if you choose to follow God, then you know what sins you have to atone for, and you know that there's going to be some unpleasant spiritual rehab in purgatory, whatever. But you know that once you get through that, and you will, it might take a seemingly interminable long time, but once you get through that, then you're going to be in union with God. Or you can choose to say, nope, I'm not giving this up, I'm hanging on to it. And you know what the consequence of that hanging on to it is going to be. You know that you're not going to be in union with God. You are, in effect, choosing hell. And this can potentially happen. And I keep using Lane Staley as an example. People will, out of their own stubbornness, at times choose hell. Lewis, again, does a great job describing this in The Great Divorce. Objection 5, page 303, this is really straightforward. Even hell is not contrary to human freedom, it seems contrary to human sanity. Well, was Staley saying? No. He clearly wasn't making decisions based on his own best interest, yet he chose them anyway. That's what happens. When we choose to go to hell, in those instances we do, we are irrationally choosing to cling to the sin, choosing to cling to the thing that separates us from God. And that is the definition of insanity. When you look at a schizophrenic person, someone in particular who's actually been medicated and they've been treated, and they say, listen, dude, you've got this serious mental disorder. You've got to take your meds. Otherwise, you're going to lose your grip on reality. And some people actually actively embrace that lack of reality. If you want an illustration of this sort of thing, I'd urge you to read up on a guy by the name of Syd Barrett, S-Y-D Barrett, B-A-R-R-E-T-T. He was the original leader, songwriter, lead guitarist, vocalist for Pink Floyd back in the 60s. And he's the one that was responsible for getting them off the ground, but then in the late 60s he started showing some really significant symptoms of schizophrenia, catatonic in particular, and he refused treatment. Even though he knew there was something going wrong with him. He chose, literally, to stay insane. Objection 6. Page 304. Hell seems contrary to the morality of Jesus. Bertrand Russell argues any teacher who believed and taught hell couldn't be a truly moral teacher. He thought the God of Christianity to be a cosmic hypocrite. We can distinguish 4 elements of this criticism as immoral. A, vengeance. B, cruelty. C, mercilessness. And D, retributive punishment itself. Didn't the ethic of Jesus substitute non-judgmental forgiveness for retributive punishment? How can the morality we're supposed to practice be higher than its divine Savior? I'm going to make this very simple. And I actually talk about this the bottom paragraph, look at the opening sentence. The critic is confusing forgiving with condoning. What Russell is suggesting is that God should simply condone our sin. Oh, you're still embracing your sin? That's okay. You can still get into heaven. Where's the learning in that? Okay? Where's the growth? God would be doing us a disservice, just like I'd be doing you a disservice if I sit here and say, oh, don't worry about your work. Just coast. Much as you might prefer to do that, frankly, in many ways, much as I would prefer to do that. Do you think I want to grade your unit tests in psych? Do you think I want to give you oral finals? Sorry, no offense, but do I want to read 34 essays? And I'm sure some of them are going to be great, but think about that for a minute. Do I want to do that? No, but I've got a responsibility to try and inform you, and I try and take that responsibility seriously. And if you simply decide, well, I'm going to turn in a 2-page paper, and I'm not going to do a presentation, I'm not going to study for the final, and I blow it off, you're not learning and growing from that. Condoning and forgiving are not the same thing, and that's what Russell is doing here. Finally, objection 7. The effect of believing in hell is the opposite of what the God of the Bible wants from us. God wants faith, hope, and love, but if we believe in hell, we naturally feel fear, despair, and hatred. There is something of a kernel of truth in this, but it gets back to a question I asked much earlier. Does God want us... Back up. A, does God want us to follow him? Yes or no? The answer is yes. B, does God want us to follow him out of... I got held up there. B, does God want us to follow him out of fear or out of obedience? Now remember, the first thing he wants is for us to follow him. So, will he accept us following out of fear? Yes, he will. What would he prefer? To follow out of love, out of genuine desire to follow his precepts. So, the specific objection reads, seems to be the opposite of what the God of the Bible wants from us. Well, yes, it is. Okay? God doesn't want us to follow out of fear. And he doesn't put this up as a means of necessarily motivating us to follow. But if that's what works, it's certainly better than nothing. Because in the end, you actually will be... Here's one of the mysteries. When you do actually go to heaven, you're not going to be following out of fear. You're going to be going out of love and obedience. Okay? So while it seems contradictory, it really isn't. And I realized I was kind of toying with the idea of making you read all those objections. There's no way we will get through those. So, we're going to stop here and assign the rest for later. Have a good weekend.